didn't leave a name again. Please leave your name when you're sending in a question because I don't want to read your email out. I recently rewatched the angle of Kevin Sullivan debuting as the Master in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. One thing always got me is that you cursed, saying, "This shit ain't gonna air." Did Jim know you were going to curse, or did you okay it first? When did you guys realise the mic wasn't on or working post the attack?
Well, I forgot. I remember it well. But the arm didn't bleed. I don't know why. I mean, he cut him right around I think here, but it wasn't a lot of blood. And I'm thinking, damn, is the guy human? But I forgot whether Jimmy okayed that, because I'm sure I wouldn't have said that on my own. I think he says, talk like you would normally talk. What he was saying, Dutch, cuss if you want to. He said, we're going to edit it anyway. And they did. You could see the X's, going across the arm. And that was, I guess, Smoky Mountain's way of editing the kids seeing it. It was gruesome. It really was. So I'm thinking, this Japanese guy comes all the way from Japan, all the way to LA, then to Atlanta, then to Knoxville, then get in the car and drive 4 hours to this mountain town to do TV or wherever we were, to cut his arm, or have Sullivan cut his arm. And I'm thinking, damn, what are they paying this guy? I mean, I don't know. But it was pretty damn gruesome, really. Me and Bob Caudle, and I love working with Bob Caudle. He's the greatest. I mean, if you have a color man, have the color man do all the bullshit. And then Bob Caudle would be the straight guy.
He was a reassuring voice, wasn't he, for many years?
He'd say, well, Dutch, what are you saying? And I would do some more of my bullshit. But he would give me time to talk and it was entertaining, actually. But I've heard like J.R. Ross and Heyman, sometimes they would go at each other, see who was going to have the last word. And neither one of them won. But that was JR's, that was his style. That was Heyman's style. But me working with Bob Caudle, it was a pleasure. It's like working with Lance Russell. They would amplify what you're saying, but in a more subdued tone, in a more reserved, civil tone. And he left all the crazy, wild, extravagant things that I could say, which marked a big contrast between us. Bob Caudle, I think, one of the most lower underrated announcers they've ever had.
With Kevin Sullivan, I didn't realize how long he actually spent in Smoky Mountain. And what did the fans make of him? Because I think they were some of the more, dare I say, gullible fans who, you could tell him pretty much anything, they buy it. And Kevin Sullivan is a psychopath and cult leader. What did they make of him?
Well, he started that psychopathic gimmick in Florida.
With the Thriller entrance as well. I always thought that was such an incongruous theme.
And he had, who was his valet's name? What was her name? He ended up with
Nancy,
and she ended up with Chris.
And what?
Yep. He did a great job within Florida. I wasn't around him that much in Smoky Mountain, but I think Smoky Mountain would have done better, except they didn't have any big towns. Knoxville was the biggest town they had. Knoxville is a spot show for WWE. So he would run like Morristown, and he would run those smaller towns. But if he'd had towns like Memphis or even Nashville, or towns with 1 million population, I mean, I think he'd have done a lot better. But I don't think the towns were big enough to support the business, to support the company. Who was the guy who was one of the investors? Rick
Rubin.
And he was Rick Rubin. When I found out about that, that was kept quiet. I don't know why. I don't even know who Rick Rubin is then. I guess you could explain it to me.
He was a music producer, came famous for producing the Beastie Boys albums at first. He's done loads, Johnny Cash.
Oh, he's done everybody. He's done a lot. But I found out about it. And one day I asked Cornette, I says, where in the F? See how I control my cursing on the show. And I asked Jimmy one day, I said, where in the F did Rick Rubin come from? Because I was in LA when I was with WWE. And we had word backstage that Rick Rubin's in the crowd right there at ringside. Of course, Rick Rubin, he remembered me from Smoky Mountain, but he didn't come up and introduce himself. I never met him. But, and I asked Cornette, how in the hell did he get into, how did he meet you? And you came up with Knoxville, I guess. How did you get him interested? And then Cornette said he was interested on his own. Said he loved wrestling. He liked how we did it. And that he wanted to be a part of it. And then Jimmy, being the salesman he is, instead of his money, he put up Rick Rubin's money. And I don't know how long Smoky Mountain was in business. I think that's 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah, somewhere between 3 and 4. It was 91 to late-ish 95.
Yeah, well, something like that. But Rick Rubin ended up being one of the owners of the company. I guess Jimmy and I don't know who else had a piece of it. But Rick Rubin, even eventually finding out that he owned part of the country and it was an enlightenment to me. Oh, wait a minute. You there?
I'm still here. There we go. Well, while you're dealing with that, you do know that the one character that Rick Rubin insisted go on Smoky Mountain TV, don't you?
Yes. The Mummy. Mm-hmm. I asked Jimmy one day or two, I said, Jimmy, wait a minute. I thought you didn't like this shit. And he didn't. He didn't like those extravagant gimmicks like that. But he said Rick Rubin wanted a mummy. And guess what? He got a mummy. And it was Killer Kyle. We put him out there, and Jimmy told him how to act. And he was with Daryl Van Horn. And actually it wasn't a bad deal, to tell you the truth. Because it made him look, it was just, I don't know. I mean, wrestling is wrestling. Now, you take it for what it is.